Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be painting some sunflowers. This is going to be a size 30 by 40 canvas. Very large. This is a request from my boss at the flower shop where I do flowers also. So I hope you enjoy this painting. It is long, and I did try to shorten it some, but it is a long video because it does take a long time to get all the layers. She requested something abstract, but knowing that I know she loves sunflowers, and I'll show you my inspiration photo in a bit, but sunflowers were just what came to mind, and sometimes you have to go with what you feel. So right now I'm taking this, and I'm going to be using today some Chalk Country Finishes chalk paint. I'm going to use Americana paints and some Dixie Belle as well, and a lot of water. So what I started doing was getting my base coat of the gray flannel Chalk Country Finishes paint, and I just poured some on and kind of spread it around with my 2-inch brush, trying to get a base down to kind of look like a sky or something of the sort. So what I start with is the Chalk Country Flannel Chalk Country Flannel color, and I'm adding some Americana white to it to kind of mix it up a little bit, make lights and darks. And what you're gonna see with this background layer is tons and tons of layers of color, and I'll usually start them off a little more harsh looking and then soften them down with my 2-inch brush. And this is like anytime you're doing an abstract, you really want to create something that is got a lot of depth to it, even though it may look like just a lot of paint just spread onto a canvas. The whole idea is to create the depth, and that's what draws you in. Welcome to Ivycreates. I'm Deanna Carroll. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate you being here. And this painting did take me about a day and a half or so to make, and it's worth a try. Now what I'm doing with the brush is I'm going to show you a lot of different techniques. Now this particular one, I use water, and I soak the brush in water and just kind of dab it around and hit the brush so that it makes the watermarks on the canvas, and that way I can not only move paint, but also it creates cool little effects if you leave the watermarks on there. And then I'm going to add in some other colors. And one of the ways that I like to do this is to get my brush really wet, and since it is a 2-inch brush, on one side of it I put some of the color, and then I lay it kind of at an angle on the canvas just to distribute some of that color, leaving the paint side up. So where I applied the paint is on the top side of the brush, and where I put the brush down on the canvas is on the bottom side. So this is a way to distribute paint without it being too globby when you put it on the canvas, and just kind of spread it around a little bit. And you can see me putting it across the top and putting on some other colors as well. You don't have to have just one color. And now I'm just going to move it around on my canvas a little bit and make different dabs of color. Thank you for watching so much. Please subscribe, like, hit that notification bell, leave me comments, tell me what you think of this and all that good stuff. I would really love to hear from you. And I do answer my comments, so please feel free to leave some. So you can see as I'm adding more of my Americana paints to my brush, just to give it, highs and lows and dark and light, the depth that it needs. And I did go at some points and I let layers dry for a little bit in between, and then some layers I just made more wet. I hope you're enjoying this, and I hope you stayed to the end for the final product pictures. And it actually shows it in my boss's house, so she was pleased with it, and I've got several more commissions now. So please enjoy. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment box below. You can also check out any materials that I may use. My favorite crafting materials are also listed below in the description. And I invite you, please go ahead and hit the links from there, and that'll give me credit for whatever you purchase. So now I'm adding blues and whites just around the canvas, just more and more blues and whites to give it different colors. I like using the Chalk Country finishes or a chalk paint of some sort as a base because, for one thing, the chalk paint sticks to almost anything, and it gives you a matted, porous kind of base to work other paints into, and that is, it just works out really, really well. Now, I've got some blues music as our background music, and I am just a huge fan of blues. Love it, always. And, enjoy listening to it, and I hope you do too. Now I added some of the green meadow Chalk Country finishes. And Chalk Country Finishes does go and change out their colors every so often, so you do get different colors. But you can do this with any kind of a yellowish green kind of color. And again, this is just adding more to my base, and I am dropping water droplets all over the canvas to, be able to move the paint around and to make, and for effect, it's nice for that too. And again, I start off with this, bright green blobs on the canvas, and then I work them down to being softer. Now, what you saw me take it off the table, that was to kind of make the paint drip around a little bit on the canvas and purposely run, so that it could have more different effects. And now I'm going to add a few more colors, a few more blues and a few different grays, and to give it, again, more depth. Lots and lots of layers. And here's some white to bring it up a little. Now, I could just leave it like that, and that would be abstract, but I got a long ways to go in this painting. I hope you're enjoying this. I really do. You can see my little Lucy down there on the bottom of the screen, on the bottom right, and there's Lefty. And Tank is over on the other side, but you can't really see him. Those are my babies. So now that I've added all that paint around, I'm just kind of haphazardly using a small flat brush to spread the paint just a little bit and start to blend it some. Because I do want the paint layers underneath to show, but I don't want it to be so prominent. So I spread the paint around, and then I'll go back and soften that up again. And this is the way also when I do like clouds or something of the sort, and I want to do a background for my clouds. This is pretty much how I start with it. I use lots of different layers, lots of different colors, and then I go back around with my big brush, and I'll usually get it a little bit more dried off, and kind of use my dry brush to spread around the paint. If you got too much water, too runny or what have you, I do need to keep this paint wet, so I am spreading some water as well. But if you have too much water on your brush, you can always just wipe it off with a paper towel, and then you can spread it a little bit. And if it won't move at all, add a little bit of water. You can see how this wide flat brush, number 2-inch, it's just a chip brush, and it's got kind of rough bristles to it, and that is spreading and softening the paint. Trying to take out some of the brush strokes. Now I had to turn it around, and I do advise this, switching the directions of your painting as you're working on it, because that gives you more perspective into the proportions and how it should look. And if you're doing an abstract background like I am, you want all of it to kind of be similar, not perfectly the same, but you don't want any particular area sticking out like a sore thumb. So I spin the canvas around and then work on it again, looking where I need to soften and where I can leave the brighter colors. And I do advise to stand back and take a look at what you're doing. You might have to stand back pretty far, in fact, sometimes, to take a look at what you're doing, so that way you know where you're going with it. Now, you can see I've started to draw in my giant sunflowers, and I'm using just a really soft pastel pencil. You can use chalk, you can use whatever you want. I like to use the chalk on it because that way, or the pastel, so if I want to, I can easily paint over it, or I can move it, blend it out so you don't even see the chalk if I don't want it. So I'm using the same green again that I'd put in earlier with the Chalk Country Finishes. And I'm just going to block in color. And y'all have heard me use that term before. It's not adding details, it's just blocking in color. That's all we're doing, is we're just going to put some color down to know exactly where we want our sunflowers. And that can all change too. But this is just to give you an idea, where do I want my sunflowers, how do I want them to look, where do I want them to face. Now, I would imagine that my light source, because you do have to imagine where your light source is coming from. So in this case, it's going to be the top right of the canvas is where I kind of want my light source coming from. And the reason why you want to know where your light source is so you can make your highlights facing your light source, and the lower, darker things can face away from your light source. So now I'm going with some the Chalk Country with the black. I think it's called Asphalt, and I'm just going to put the center of my sunflowers in there. They're not snowflowers; they're sunflowers. I remember taking a trip to Canada, to Guelph in particular. My sister was up there for a convention, so I went with her. And I got to use a truck and drive around all day, and I ran across this gorgeous, gorgeous farm. And it had fields and fields of sunflowers, and a big red barn right in the middle of it, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'll try to include a picture of that at the end of this video for you to be able to see, because it was so beautiful. Now here's my inspiration picture on the right. I found it on Pinterest. This is what I wanted to use for my colors, so I could get the colors from this. Now I will tell you, I loved this. This artist did a fantastic job, and nothing that I do is going to be the same as what she did. And when you use an inspiration picture, it's not that you have to make it exactly like whatever's on the picture. You make your version of it, and every artist is going to be different. So I can look at her picture directly, and I am a very good mimic, but I don't make it exactly like she does. I make it very different than what she did. So this is the inspiration picture that I used, and it was mostly because I really liked the colors in this, and because my boss wanted an abstract painting, I wanted to make the more abstract sunflowers. And you can see I'm just starting to add in the greens, the lights and the darks to get my stems, now that I know where the heads of the sunflowers are going to be. And then I want to kind of line in where my leaves are going to be. And you don't want these to be perfect. That was one of the things when I was a younger painter. Knowing the shapes of things in a 3D world, trying to take it to 2D, it was really hard. So I would think of a sunflower and I'm like, oh, all sunflowers have a round, perfectly round center, and they have all these leaves that are perfectly around the sides. But that's not how we look at things. How we look at things is we may look at the head and it's angled away from us. So it's important to remember that don't make your heads on your sunflowers perfectly round or anything like that. You want it to be a little off and a little different. So you can see me often using my phone to reference the colors that are in this particular inspiration photo that I have. And I'll look back and reference several times just so I can get it kind of close to whatever the picture is. So when I want to paint something, I am a visual person. I can paint without having a picture of anything very well, especially swamps, because it's one of my favorite things on earth. But I prefer to have, at least the first couple of times I paint something, an inspiration photo. I may go back and repaint something else, totally different with the sunflowers and use the same colors. Like I said before, it is important to take a step back every now and then and take a look at your painting from a distance and from different angles to make sure it is exactly what you want and the proportions are what you want them to be. Now you can see I'd let the background dry pretty well before I started painting on the flowers, so I was able to set a napkin down because this canvas was huge and set my paints up there where I could see them. And I use my little paint pots, which I make my own mixture of colors and everything. So I'm just using some of the different greens that I have on hand to come up with the stem colors and everything else. And as you can see by my inspiration photo, it is definitely not going to stay those colors. We're going to go through lots of color transitions before we get to our final stem color product with the leaves. Now, I am also a floral designer. I do a lot of different things on my YouTube channel, and I do know what real sunflowers look like. And they typically have a very light colored stem and everything, although this doesn't end up being like that, and the inspiration picture is not really like that. But, like I said, I wanted to go with the colors of the inspiration picture. Now you can see I'm starting to use a bit of the light green, and in some cases I'm using some of the blacks and the other colors to low light. It is a real challenge. I will tell you this. I try to paint pictures without using hardly any white or any black. Try that sometimes because it makes the whole painting completely different. And I had noticed that a lot of the older masters and stuff, they might not use black and white in their photos, in their paintings. But try it sometimes because it makes your shadows completely different. Like you can see in the inspiration photo, they use their purple colors as their shadow colors and their darker colors, and they use the reds and the yellows as their lighter colors. And I just thought that was fascinating. And then she's got some blues and stuff also as highlight. So try it. Try to do different techniques. Try to learn different stuff. It kind of stretches you as a painter or as an artist in general. And another thing that I also noticed, you make larger strokes when you're making a background, but try painting with a smaller brush. If you paint with a smaller brush and you have smaller strokes, there are advantages to that, and it gives you a lot more depth to a painting. I watched a different artist who used nothing but a small little flat brush for his entire painting of a 16 by 20 canvas. I thought that was amazing. So, and the way that he does it, it's just little tiny strokes. I tend to do some big sweeping strokes, and now I've mixed it into where there are some that are going to be small, tiny, short strokes. And never be afraid to paint. Never ever be afraid to paint anything, because if you don't like it, you can always paint over it. You can see on the sunflower closest to the bottom of the screen that there are two small leaves up by the head of the sunflower. Well, you will see later on that in the end I didn't like them there, so I painted over them. And that's just one example of many ways that you can do things to change your painting while you're painting it. And not everything, you're not going to make mistakes when you can paint over it. If you can fix it, it's not a mistake. So you'll see in a little bit when I paint over it, I use different colors to blend it out, and so you don't see those leaves anymore. And the further you move from a painting from the background to the foreground, the shorter and smaller strokes you could use and the smaller a brush. Now you can see I'm starting to add some bright blue, just like my inspiration picture, just to make some different highlights and lowlights in my canvas. And I'll also go back and add more purples. when you're using the chalk paints and stuff, the best part of that is you can always go back and sand them a little bit to pull underneath colors. If you wanted to, you can sand it down to make it nice and smooth, or to even add more colors underneath. Now I'm going to be going back to the heads, and I am putting a little bit of the black around the edges as a sunflower would typically have, and I kind of smudge it out with my fingers a little bit so that it's not so bold of a black. I want it to be kind of a black brown, and that's basically to make the heads more rounded looking. We're smudging the black around the outside, trying to use a fairly dry brush. Put the paint just along the line and then kind of smudge it out into the center with a dry brush or your fingertip, whichever works best. And then add, just a few lines here and there to give you your lines for your leaves to show where the veins are. Now I'm going back and adding just a few little highlights here and there of my pollen on the tops of my sunflowers. And you'll see me do this many times, back and forth, back and forth. I'll add something, I'll lower it down. I'll add something, I'll make it softer looking. It's all about getting to that final end product where it actually is just right, and you'll see that. Now you can see, remember I said I was going to take those two leaves out because they were really bothering me? Well, I threw some purple on it and took them out, and you never even know they were there. So we're coming up, we're getting closer and closer. I didn't want to do the leaves until the last part, the petals on the flowers, because those are going to be mostly foreground, and usually I like to wait till the very end to do the things that are closest to you in the painting. So I'm going to start adding my leaves now that I'm satisfied with the way the stems look. And the leaves look. I can start adding some petals on the flowers, and I may still go back and adjust, the petals, the stems and all that good stuff, the leaves. But for right now, I'm going to focus on the petals to the flowers. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you being here and for sticking with me and watching the video. The painting turned out better than I expected it to. I was really pleased with it, and I think she was really happy with it as well. Please don't forget to subscribe, and also to look in the description for any of the products that I used. You can see them down there, and if you want to, you can even order them from there. There are links posted. So now I'm starting with this is the sunflower that is going to be the closest to the picture that I have, my inspiration picture. So I'm starting with my background of a beautiful orangey red color. Now my sunflowers are not going to be as pretty and perfect as the one that's in my inspiration photo. I wanted these to be kind of rough and crazy looking, you know, a little bit more wild. As I go through putting in my different petals for my flowers, I will add and remove some colors. So I may make one more yellow, one more red, the different petals. It's important to note, I really didn't have a plan when I started this. The only thing I had was my inspiration photo, and that was all that I really thought about. And then my next part of the design was, I typically design, and most design is done in prime numbers or odd numbers, definitely not even numbers. So I wanted to make sure that I had, because it's such a big canvas, I wanted to have 5 sunflowers at least. Not 4, not 6, but 5, because it makes it more interesting. Now I'm going back and I'm adding some of the yellow highlights along the pieces of the petals. Even numbers are just not as pleasing to the eye when you're doing artwork as odd numbers. Works for doing floral design as well. If you're going to do floral design, you should always do odd numbers of flowers. Now you can change that as you get to become more and more well versed in whatever your particular area of I don't know how to say it. Your area of artistic talent. There we go. You can bend the rules oftentimes, but you have to learn the basics first before you can bend the rules. So now I'm basically color blocking in my sunflowers. This is not going to be the final bit of what they look like. They're going to change a lot through my process, but I am going to start color blocking in just large petals that are definitely not perfect, that are kind of wonky and fun and just out there. I really didn't have anywhere in my house that was big enough to do this project, so I'm sitting literally in my bay window at my kitchen table and another table that I pulled out to try and get this on camera, because it is a really big canvas and hard to paint in a small area. And always take a step back, look at what you're doing. Like I said, from many different angles, things will change how they look accordingly. So definitely take a step back and think about it as you're going, because now we're getting to the more intentional side of our painting. So what we put down now is going to be a lot more intentional than when we started. Granted, I'm doing just the color block on the petals, but it is more intentional because we've already got all the background stuff done. And you know, if you make something you don't like, you can always paint over it still, but it would be a whole lot easier if you don't. So I had to turn the canvas around so that I could see and reach more closely to the flowers. And you can see that I have 5 sunflowers that I'm going to be painting here. And I'm really trying to think about, well, what way would the petals go and how would they feel in the direction of the sun, which is on the top right side of my canvas in my imaginary world, you know. So most of the time sunflowers will turn to face the sun, but these are blowing around in the wind. They look kind of crazy, and so I want them to be definitely doing their own thing. And definitely I do not want the petals to be perfect. I want them to be kind of funky. You want to make them kind of rounded and fat towards the head of the sunflower, and then long and narrow as you leave out from the sunflower. This also works well if you were to be painting daisies. It kind of works in the same fashion. Turned it around again so I could reach the one in the middle. Like I said earlier, I drew these in with a soft pastel pencil of white just so I could figure out, you know, exactly where I wanted everything. You don't have to do that. I just did it. And you probably can't see it very well on camera at all, but, you know, it gives you a good idea if you have a basic knowledge of where things are going. So now I'm going to go just right around the base, you know, close to the head of the flower, and add a little bit of that orange that's in my other sunflowers just to give it a little variance in color. Make it stand out a little bit. If you see me going over there and using my paintbrush to add something to my paint pots, it's water. I'm adding water to my paint pots maybe to make my paint a little bit thinner so it'll flow easier. And I have a little cup of water over there that I use, and I pick up water with my paintbrush from time to time to add to my paint pots or to put on my canvas. That makes the colors a little bit more transparent, and it also makes it flow a little bit easier if I should need that. You want the colors as you're close to the head of the sunflower to be a little bit darker than the tips of the sunflower, because it's going to be where your fresh growth is toward the head. So that'll be a bit of a more intense color than it would be towards the tip. So I'm adding some bright, like school bus yellow kind of color to my sunflowers out of the paint pot. And it's got that a little bit slightly orange yellow. My favorite color. Alright, so I added some water to my paint pot, closed the lid and shook it up so that I could put a little bit of transparent color onto my sunflower, and that little bit more of the orange color, and smooth it out with my fingertips. I'm one that tends to not waste any paint whatsoever. I want to use every bit of paint I've got. So a lot of times when I have extra paint on my paintbrush, as opposed to rinsing it off or wiping it off with a paper towel, I tend to wipe it off somewhere on the canvas. And especially when you're doing an abstract, it works really well. But I definitely am frugal with my paints. And I use my little paint pots as if you had a palette. If somebody used a palette, it would be the same basic principle, except that when I get done painting a particular color, I just close the lid on it, and that way it's saved if I need to use that color again instead of having it dry out. So now I'm going to start to add some of the deep purple shadows that you see in the inspiration photo. I'm going to add those now to the undersides or the back side of my sunflower. So now I'm going to do the under petals, you know, like the outer protective petals on the sunflower. And these are the ones that are usually on the bottom side. If you're doing a rose, it would be the bottom side of a rose and they would be green. But I'm going to be doing them like my inspiration photo, darker color, and then I'm going to put some purple over the top of that. So now I'm going to add more detail to my center sunflower that is going to be the closest to my other orange one that is, you know, from my inspiration photo. And I'm using dark purple as my my darker color along the edges and the interior of my sunflower. Now purple and orange are more complementary colors. Well, purple and yellow are actually the complementary colors, but purple and orange frequently are not seen together. And so that makes for a nice transition in different colors. It kind of pops. Thank you so much for staying and watching this video with me. I really do appreciate you being here. Please subscribe and click that notification bell. Leave me comments. Tell me what you think. I mean, do you think that I was close enough but not too close to the inspiration photo? That's generally my goal. I don't want to be exactly like my inspiration photo, but I do want to be similar. You don't want to really copy somebody else's work. You want to do your own version of the work, but you know, sometimes you want to get just the right colors. So I've taken down my inspiration photo. I think we've gotten all of our usefulness out of that. And you can see my bay window behind me that's loaded with orchids and other stuff. So I'm still adding more and more colors and more layers to my beautiful sunflowers. Now I'm beginning to work on my last sunflower and the furthest away. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I will have some more painting videos coming up very soon. Thank you again so much for being here and watching with me. Check out many of my other videos. I've got tons of them, all different kinds of things. I'm always learning new stuff, and I love to teach new stuff and share it with you. You can do this, and I totally believe that anybody can do this. Anybody can paint. It's just a matter of practice, that's all. And if you don't like it, you just paint over it. That's the way it goes. You don't also have to use a canvas. For years I thought, oh my God, you only need to use a canvas to paint on. No, that is not the case. You can paint on anything, and I do mean anything. If wood is your choice, paint on pieces of plywood. Find scraps. Find whatever you can to paint on. To me, in my house, if it's standing still long enough, it'll probably get painted. And use different kinds of paint, even together. Please don't think that you have to go out and purchase this kind of paint to do this. You don't. You can use house paint. You can use whatever paints you want to use. You can find bits and pieces of acrylic paints and chalk paints. I use it all. I might use a Sharpie markers. Sometimes I guess you would call me a mixed media artist. I've never understood how you could not be a mixed media artist, because some things are just better suited than others for getting the look that you want. So I use colored pencils, I use markers, pastels, paints, anything and everything. And whatever I can find, I can pick up. In fact, I can tell you this, my bedroom is probably a conglomeration of about 20 different leftover paints that people had that I mixed all together and put up on the wall. So feel free to try new things. Try additives to your paints too. I add spackling paste to my paints to give it more body and different things like that. A lot of times, like I said, I'm very frugal with my paints because, starving artist and all. But you can find all kinds of things just laying around the house to use as paint additives or to help you along with your mixed media project. I did love the way this came out. I thought it came out fantastic, and I probably will do another one like this because I really did like it. I also try to add a little bit of magic to each of my paintings, so I may go and add like the folk art royal gold to my paint, or sometimes I'll wait till the very end and I'll seal the painting and then I'll go over it with a little glow in the dark paint just to have a little bit of magic, maybe even glitter from now. Nothing is off limits. Be your own creative person. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, did you click that subscribe button and the notification bell? Well, if you don't hit that notification bell, you will miss out on our Thursday videos. So please go ahead, click it, and you'll be able to watch our videos that are coming up.